I will take you to a place where my friends foregather. There are vampires, werewolves, ghouls, every kind of monster you could ever imagine.
The Monster Club is an 80s horror anthology starring Vincent Price, and it is a film that is so committed to entertaining you. It will spend minutes upon minutes on explaining a monster genealogical chart.
Oh, that's a monster's genealogical chart.
What?
What's going on, my friends? Welcome again to the Cobwebs channel. My name is Daniel, and this is actually one of my most requested reviews. You might not think that I've been getting a bunch of requests to talk about this random weirdo 80s horror anthology, The Monster Club, but I absolutely have. And the reason for that is probably because I've discussed a lot of horror anthology films around this time period. Like all the anthologies made by Amicus, like Tales from the Crypt and The Vault of Horror, movies like that. And The Monster Club is not a film by that company, Amicus, but it is produced by Milton Shabotsky, who produced all of those movies, and it's directed by Roy Ward Baker. Roy Ward Baker also directed several of those Amicus anthologies and a lot of cool movies for Hammer as well. But The Monster Club is less the Vampire Lovers, Quatermass in the Pit, Roy Ward Baker, and more Scars of Dracula, Roy Ward Baker. Okay, I guess you have to be a really big nerd to understand that, but basically, this is a schlocky movie.
You've been invited to the Monster Club. Come at your peril.
We open up with a very uneventful title card. Okay, it's called The Monster Club. Produced by Sword and Sorcery Productions. Okay, I guess a horror movie is not really going to be their passion project. Wait, hold on. John Williams? Okay, it's not actually that John Williams. Yes, I did look it up. Now we're opening up with John Carradine. John Carradine, absolute horror legend from Universal Monsters movies, like when he played Dracula. He's also in the Joe Dante film, The Howling, in a ton of cool horror movies. So it's really cool to see him here. He's just walking down the street when, okay, now we've got Vincent Price, one of my favorite actors. So good to see him in this movie. He seems to be pretending to be some kind of a beggar, and then, okay, he's biting John Carradine. Yes, Vincent Price is a vampire in this movie.
I say, what happened to your fangs?
Oh, they're retractable when not in use.
Now, Vincent Price is like one of the most legendary horror actors of all time, but he actually hardly ever played a vampire. He certainly wasn't like Christopher Lee in that sense. So it's cool to see him get to do that here, although in a much less serious way than Christopher Lee would, for sure. It turns out John Carradine is a horror author. His character is named R. Chetwood Hayes. And if that name sounds familiar to you, it's because that's actually a real guy. All of the stories in this movie are going to be based on stories by R. Chetwood Hayes. He also was the basis for the Amicus horror anthology, From Beyond the Grave. So it's cool that he's getting some representation in this movie, played by John Carradine.
You are the great R. Chetwynd Hayes, the writer of those magnificent horror stories.
I wouldn't have thought you needed to read horror stories.
And Vincent Price's character, Aramis, we're probably just going to call him Vincent Price in this review, is actually a really big fan of his, and because of that, he invites him to come to his Monster Club.
The, Monster Club.
It's an actual club with live music, dancing, drinks, all populated by monsters. And honestly, this club, it reminds me of Halloween Town, the kids' Disney movie. Just the way that you've just got all these monsters around, but they're super goofy looking. They do not look even slightly real. To go into this movie, you really got to be ready for a goofy, schlocky, fun experience. Monsters rule okay. Monsters rule okay. Monsters rule okay. Monsters rule okay. Yes, this is the first of many songs we're going to hear in this movie. The Monster Club is almost a little bit of a musical in that periodically throughout this film, within the Monster Club, there's going to be different bands on stage playing different songs. Now, this song absolutely cracks me up because the chorus is Monsters rule okay. That is hilarious. I kind of wish the song sounded a little bit spookier or Halloween-y or something, but it really just sounds like a just normal pop song that happens to say, Monsters rule, okay? After a bit of banter and funny lines like Vincent Price trying to order type B blood, but they're all out.
And I'll have to make do with that common typo.
The gentleman's attention turns to a genealogical chart on the wall that shows all of the different possible results of crossbreeding among the monster world.
Now, a vampire and a werewolf would produce a werevamp.
That makes sense, but a werewolf and a ghoul crossbreeding would produce a weregoo, goo.
But a vampire and a ghoul would produce a vamgoo.
And a weird goo and a goo bop would produce a bleebagook. And okay, this goes on for a while, and like it's just, if you are any kind of a horror fan, you've got to be cracking up right now. This is such a ridiculous scene. But Vincent Price is explaining it so seriously. He's just selling every bit of it. It cracks me up. But finally, they're getting way on down this big old family tree, and they get to the bottom and we find a Shadmock. And Vincent Price explains that a Shadmock is the lowest of all of the vampire hybrids, a horrifying creature with a whistle with devastating results. Yes, I did say a whistle. Whistles are very scary. And if you agree, you're going to really love this story. And now we're going into the first segment of this anthology called The Shadmock. We open up with a guy in a straitjacket. So clearly something horrific has happened to him. Flash back to what could have caused this. And it's him and his girlfriend. And it turns out they are con artists. They're looking for a job, their next score, somebody to take for all they're worth. Now these actors, first of all, are Simon Ward, who you may recognize for being the male lead opposite Peter Cushing in Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. And the woman is Barbara Kellerman, absolutely gorgeous in this movie and really, really good in it. And it turns out what she's going to do is answer an ad to work for a reclusive rich man off on a distant mansion. She goes to his mansion and there finds him, and he is our Shadmock. Now, a Shadmock is a hybrid of a werewolf, vampire, and ghoul. I don't know how or at least some kind of combination of the two as we go. I don't really remember. But immediately when the door opens and she sees his face, she's clearly terrified. And what else can she possibly do but run away from this horrific monster?
The way he looked, there was something terrifying about him. I'm not going back.
But in this scene, we actually do get to see this creature, the Shadmock. It doesn't hold the reveal too long. And when we see him...
Wait for it. Wait for it.
He looks like a guy. Like... he just looks like a guy. Like, what are we doing? What is happening? Like, yeah, his hairstyle is definitely not great. Seems a little pale, a little dark around the eyes. I usually am too, to be honest with you. But he just looks like some guy. So, like, what is she afraid of? Now, Angela, that's her character's name, absolutely does not want to go back. She does not want to face this frightening Shadmock again. But her greedy boyfriend convinces her to go back so that they can con this guy. And she goes and ends up accepting the job. He is only too happy to actually find somebody who's willing to work for him, unlike everybody else who is too terrified of his horrific face, when again, he just looks like some guy, but whatever. But there are some interesting hints that he leaves to his relations, his ancestors, who are very different, he's very uneasy about them. And of course, we know it's vampires, werewolves, and ghouls. I actually did do a little research into a Shadmock to find if it was based on anything, but it does seem to be original to this movie. So they just thought, wow, this is an amazing idea for a new monster. This is going to be the next big thing. Like, move over Michael Myers. We've got the new king of horror, the Shadmock. After she's working for him for a little bit, I think they're like cataloging his library or something. I don't know. I'm not totally sure. We get another scene of her home with her boyfriend. She's again talking about it. This guy terrifies her. And like, writers of the Monster Club, you can't do this. Like, you cannot write all about how scary looking this monster is and not have the makeup artists do anything about it. I can't believe Roy Ward Baker thought he could just get away with this. It makes this segment so ridiculous. But in case you thought I was just gonna straight up bash this segment, no, things actually get a little bit more interesting. He actually proposes marriage to her. He's fallen in love with her, and honestly, who can blame him when there's a woman in your house and she looks like Barbara Kellerman? You propose marriage. And she runs away. She's not sure what to say. And when she's back with her boyfriend, she says, I can't do this to him, which is interesting. This is the only part where we get a hint that she's not just scared of him. Maybe she does feel bad for him. And pity is the proper emotional response to have for this guy. Like, no, he's not hideous. He doesn't look like a monster, but he is sad. He's a very sad recluse. He's extremely lonely.
I used to wear a mask once. It was no use. It's much better to get over the shock right at the beginning.
But he ends up convincing her that they can really take this guy for all he's worth if she does marry him. So she goes back and accepts his proposal, and he's so happy. And like, You know, this segment is kind of like Beauty and the Beast. If the Beast didn't really look like a beast, but thought he looked like a beast, but also if Belle was a con artist, you know, if you just threw that wrench into it. But I am just really a sucker for Beauty and the Beast stories. I love it. I mean, I love Beauty and the Beast. I love The Shape of Water. I love I don't know, like monster and human love story. That makes me sound weird, but you know what I mean. I mean, Beauty and the Beast is an amazing Disney movie. There's a really great French film version of it in the 40s. It's a great story. So I'm just kind of a fan of these like sad recluse finds love in an unlikely place kind of stories. And that's what's about this segment that works for me. I think it would be better if she started to develop feelings for him and more feelings of conflict, but you can't have everything. He decides to have an engagement party by inviting his relations. So we think, oh, cool, we're going to get a bunch of vampires and werewolves. It's going to be like an Addams family reunion kind of thing going on. But he makes it a masquerade ball so she doesn't have to, you know, take in all these monsters all at once. And that's exactly what it is. You know, visually speaking in the story, it just looks like a typical masquerade ball. If you're wondering if these masks are ever going to come off and we're going to see vampires and werewolves, no, that's not going to happen. One of them seems like he's got a big beard though. So I guess that's a werewolf enough for this, I guess. At one point when they're discussing his marriage, he starts to hint about how he must be careful now that they're in a relationship. He must never whistle.
I must never whistle. No matter what happens.
I don't know, man. Maybe just don't whistle. Like, what could possibly happen that would cause you like, oh no, now I have to whistle? Well, that actually did happen a little bit earlier in the segment. Actually, he did whistle at a cat and burned it up. So it seems like his whistling causes things to spontaneously combust into flames, I guess. Yeah, this story is not just about the horrors of some normal looking guy in a mansion, but also the horrors of whistling. It's like the Andy Griffith Show intro as a horror movie. During the engagement party, Angela sneaks off to his safe, starts stealing all of his money, and she seems very happy about this, which really takes away the idea that she has emotional conflict about this. She's just like, heck yeah, let's get some money. And he catches her, and his reaction to it is just so sad and tragic.
The money and the other things that don't matter to me. Do what you want with them. You could still love me.
And she talks about how horrifying he is, and she's terrified by him, and she could never love him. He whistles at her. We know this can't be good. And then we cut a little bit into the future with her boyfriend, and she appears to him.
You could still love me.
As this burned up, gooey, goopy corpse. And I love that tragic irony of her rejecting this guy because he's scary looking. And now she's in the same place. We then go back to the Monster Club, and of course, it's time for another song. This is a vampire song called Just a Sucker. And honestly, what this song really reminds me of is Herman Munster in the Rob Zombie The Munsters when he's performing on stage.
I'm from Transylvania, and I'm a pain in the neck.
Actually, this whole Monster Club, I compared it to Halloween Town. It also kind of reminds me of the Rob Zombie The Munsters. Just zany, garish nonsense, monster goofiness everywhere. And if you haven't seen this movie and you're thinking, oh, these are some songs that are like playing in the background. No. Like the movie stops repeatedly so we can watch these songs. And you know what? I'm not mad about it. A werewolf on stage introduces a vampire film producer who's going to come up on stage.
Vampire film producer?
Well, aren't they all?
And his name is Milton Shabotsky. Oh, wait. Okay, it's Lintum Bazotsky? Okay, well, that's clearly an inside joke, but this actually is not Milton Shabotsky on stage. It's just an actor, but he then goes up and introduces his latest film that he's going to show for everybody. And that leads into our next segment, which is kind of a fun framing device. And this one is called The Vampires. Right away, I just want to call out the mom of this kid is played by Britt Eklund, of course, famous for The Wicker Man. So it's really cool to see her in this. And she's saying goodbye to her son, sending him off to go walk to school. And she warns him not to talk to strangers. He walks to school slowly. We're not really sure what's going on. Then we cut to a guy in their basement. But when he comes up, it turns out that's the dad. And why was he in the basement? Well, by the looks of him, probably seems to be a vampire. Now, this actor is Richard Johnson, kind of a horror legend because he is, of course, in Robert Wise's The Haunting and also in Lucio Fulci's Zombie. I don't know, it seems like kind of a random role for him, but it's cool to see him here. And there's a lot of funny banter in this scene about how he's explaining to his kid that, hey, he's got to sleep all day because he works at night and he's got to go out all night, and that's what he does every single day. And just these little hints that, yes, he's a vampire. And it is interesting that this doesn't seem to be a whole vampire family. It seems like the wife and the kid are just people, and she just happened to marry a vampire, and that's just how their family functions. While the kid is out the next day, he is approached by Donald Pleasance. So cool to see Donald Pleasance here. And this is 1981. This is the same year as Halloween 2.
I shot him in the heart. I shot him 6 times.
And he's talking to the kid, trying to get some information of him. It seems clear that he's probably part of some kind of vampire hunting squad. And that's exactly the case. He is the leader of the B Squad, whose job is to stamp out vampirism in the country. And they all carry around violin cases, which is where they carry their vampire hunting tools. And you know, I just gotta call out, I do respect that the Monster Club is really trying to build its own mythology. I mean, the Shadmock, they made up a monster, not super well, but they did it. And now they've got vampire hunters going around with violin cases. You know, they're not just doing all the typical tropes. So I respect it. They're trying to do different things. We pretty quickly get to the climax of this story where Donald Pleasance and his boys all bust into the house and go down to have a very anticlimactic staking sequence. I feel like their hammers are just too small. They're just like beep, beep, beep. I mean, come on. Peter Cushing would just wham on that thing. You're not really selling this Donald Pleasance.
I shot him in the heart. I shot him 6 times.
But I mean, I guess our vampire is just down without much of a fight, so that's that. Oh, wait, okay, he's up and he's biting Donald Pleasance, and now they've got to kill him. And it is kind of funny watching his vampire transformation happen so quickly with his fangs already popping out. But once we're done with Donald Pleasance, we find out the dad is not actually dead.
Yeah! I always wear a stick-proof vest. What?
A steak-proof vest
Filled with tomato ketchup.
What? How on earth does that work? What are you pounding the steak into? It's just bursting ketchup everywhere? That makes absolutely no sense. I don't really understand the tone of this segment. It mostly doesn't really seem comedic for the most part, but then it's just got super goofy stuff in it like this, and this little moment. I don't know what to make of this segment. Like, it's kind of entertaining, but what is this? Back to the Monster Club. It's time for another song, and this one is called I'm a Stripper? Okay, so the first one, monsters rule, then I'm a sucker, I'm a vampire, and then I'm a stripper. That seems so random. I mean, on one hand, I kind of think it's the best song of the bunch because this woman's voice is amazing. I mean, she is just ripping it, super powerful and gravelly. It's just a great heavy voice. And then we get this amazing moment towards the end of the song where a stripper does come out and she takes things further than any other stripper normally would. Yeah, she takes her skin off and we get a dancing skeleton. That is so fun. I mean, honestly, I'm going to tell you right now, when I think of the Monster Club, the main thing I think about is this skeleton stripper, and then Vincent Price second, but skeleton stripper number 1. By the way, YouTube, please don't flag me for repeatedly saying the word stripper. I mean, I swear this video is not explicit, family friendly. It's a family friendly channel. When our boys are looking again at the genealogical chart, John Carradine zeroes in on the Hume Goo, who apparently is a hybrid between a ghoul and a human.
What do they do?
They don't do anything interesting.
But we're still gonna get a segment about them. And we kick off with this amazing gothic set with the fog and the woman with the candelabra. I love all this, but oftentimes in a kind of comedic horror movie like this, if you see a scene like this, there's like a 90% chance that it turns out to be a film set.
Cut! It's a wrap.
And yes, that is exactly what we get here, a film set. Our main character for this one is Stuart Whitman, who plays a film producer, and he has this great speech about how he is looking for a strange, eerie, lonely, half-deserted village. I mean, he's basically just describing my ideal horror movie, so I'm pretty excited that he's going to scout out this location. And the location he goes to does not disappoint. This is absolutely a strange, eerie, lonely, half-deserted village. Plenty of fog, a graveyard. This is a really cool place. And he goes into this inn and he finds Patrick Magee. Patrick Magee you might recognize especially from his great performance in Tales from the Crypt as the lead blind person in Blind Alleys, which is a great segment of that movie. And when Sam, that's the film producer's name, Sam, turns around, we get this great sudden reveal of a bunch of ghouls behind him. And you know, this segment, it's all about ghouls. It's called The Ghoul, is really good at selling me that like ghouls are awesome. Now, what are they? They're basically zombies. In fact, when George Romero made Night of the Living Dead, he just expected that he was making a movie about ghouls since zombies weren't quite as much of a thing, or especially the way they are now. But what's really cool about the ghouls in this that differentiates them from zombies is they talk. They're a little bit more thinking, functioning monsters that also happen to be the undead who walk around eating dead bodies. That's another key difference from zombies. Usually zombies are eating live flesh. These guys are usually eating dead flesh. Now he is like freaked out. The ghouls are stopping him from leaving. He goes to a room at the inn and there he meets a Hume-goo, who is a young woman who keeps saying, I Hume-goo.
I'm not like others. I Hume-goo.
Honestly, I'm kind of thinking about making a t-shirt that says I Hume-goo.
I Hume-goo.
Also, let's just pause and think about the fact that this girl is the result of crossbreeding between a human and a ghoul. So an undead, flesh-eating monster mating with... That's very disturbing. That is the most disturbing thing in this movie. Actually, speaking of disturbing things in this movie, a little bit later, Sam finds some records that detail the origin of this town and how Patrick Magee was this man who found a ghoul in the graveyard, one single one. And it tells the story of how they ended up creating more and more ghouls and they overtook the town. And the visuals here are amazing. And it's really interesting that this story is wildly tonally inconsistent with most of the rest of the movie. This story is very dark and creepy and eerie. It's by far the creepiest thing in this whole movie. Like, I love these visuals, but even the atmosphere of the town, the ghouls are pretty creepy. I really like this segment, even though it feels like it belongs in a wildly different movie. As Sam is fighting off the ghouls, who, by the way, I do wish they looked as cool as they did in those drawings, but that's okay. He discovers he can repel them with a cross. That makes sense. I mean, vampires are repelled by the same thing, but they're in a graveyard and like there's cross headstones all over. Look, there's a cross headstone right there. Like this, did nobody think about that? Sam thinks that he's able to hitch a ride out of this place, but the driver just takes him back in. I love this shot of him going back into the town too. Super creepy. And we end with a very dark ending. Going back to the Monster Club, Vincent Price is now pushing for John Carradine, Arch Edward Hayes, to get inducted into the Monster Club, even though he's a human and no humans have ever been allowed in. And Vincent Price then gives this big epic speech about how man is actually the greatest monster of all because we wage war and
Poison gas and daggers and swords and bayonets and booby traps.
I never realized she was so talented.
It almost feels like we're pausing the movie to have some kind of moral message about how like, man is the worst monster of all. We have to do better. But I don't know, delivered by a different actor, this could just feel kind of weird and awkward. But Vincent Price, again, he sells it. And he's just really driving home the camp value of this movie and of his character. This has got to be one of Vincent Price's campiest roles, which is saying something, and he's so fun in this movie. So let's go ahead and rate the Monster Club. Now, the Shadmock, I'm going to give a 5. I don't hate it. I actually think the performances here are quite good. I never even mentioned the actor who plays the Shadmock, but that's James Lawrenson. I think he's really good at being sad and tragic. I just can't believe they didn't have the makeup match the script. That just makes absolutely no sense to me, and I think it's kind of the kiss of death of this segment. But still, the doomed romance of it does speak to me, and I think it's at least decent. The Vampires also gets a 5. It's short, it's slight, there's not much story here. I like seeing Donald Pleasance. I like Richard Johnson as kind of a goofy vampire. It has an insanely ridiculous ending that kind of kills it a little bit, but it's also memorable, so what can you say? Now the Ghouls, I'm actually gonna give an 8. I really like this segment. I love the atmosphere of it. I think the Ghouls are legitimately creepy. You got nothing but good performances in here, especially by Patrick McGee. This is just solid all the way. And the wraparound, I'm also gonna give an 8. I love the wraparound here. I think it's so fun. The songs are ridiculous, but I am never upset to see them come up. They're always fun. The makeup of all the monsters around, it's bad. It looks cheap. There's no way around it. But for a just big ol' Halloween nerd like myself, it just looks like they're at a Halloween party, and it's just so fun. Vincent Price, peak camp. John Carradine's also having some fun here, and what other movie can you say shows you a monster genealogical chart? All in all, I'm gonna say the Monster Club rounds out to a 7. I think it's a lot of fun. That's my review, but what do you guys think about the Monster Club? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this, definitely click this video right over here for some more fun times, or this playlist right over here of all of my horror anthology reviews. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to enjoy yourself this Halloween season, and I will see you next time.